Hello and welcome to today's lesson where we're looking at Kolb's learning cycle. Now, Kolb's learning cycle, also known as the Experiential Learning Cycle, is a four-stage continuous process that explains how you learn. Now, the model uses the word experiential here deliberately to mean that we learn through our experiences. Now, by understanding this model, you can create better training both for your team members and for yourself. Now, David Kolb published his Experiential Learning Cycle in 1984, and the model essentially says that to learn most effectively, you must follow the four steps that you can see here: concrete experience, reflective observation, abstract conceptualization, and active experimentation. Now, while the steps of the learning cycle must be followed in sequence, you don't have to start at step 1. You can enter the model at any stage. So, for example, you could enter here at step 3, abstract conceptualization. Now, as well as providing the four-step learning process, the model also provides 4 learning styles, outlining how different types of people prefer to learn new things. And you can see that here in the quarter circles. These are the 4 different learning styles of the model. So let's jump in and look at each of the 4 steps, and then we'll look at each of the 4 learning styles. So the first step is concrete experience, and concrete experience means that it's not enough to watch someone else do it or read about it. You must do it yourself for learning to occur. Now, this can happen, for example, when you try a new task or perform an existing task in a new way. So this step aims to create a concrete experience through doing. The second step is reflective observation, and this means taking a step back from the act of doing to look at the bigger picture and review what you've just experienced. Now, tools to help you achieve reflective observation include giving your observations or being asked questions. So, for example, you could be asked, how could what you've just done be applied to different circumstances? The third step is abstract conceptualization. And in this step, you make sense of what you've just experienced. Now, to do this, you don't just look at what you've just done. You also pull in other information, theories, and ideas that you're already familiar with. Now, another way to think about this stage is that you're fitting in what you've just learned into everything you already know so that it all makes sense together. Now, tools to help achieve abstract conceptualization and solidify your ideas include presenting your ideas or creating a model or maybe writing a paper. And the final step is active experimentation, and this final stage happens when you consider how you will put what you've learned into practice. Now, if you don't plan to use what you've just learned, then it's likely that you'll forget it quite quickly. Now, note that the moment we stop planning and start doing, then we re-enter step 1 of the learning cycle again. So let's take a look at the learning styles of the model. If you remember the 4 quarter circles you can see here. Now, these learning styles are explained based on 2 dimensions. And the first dimension is whether you prefer active experimentation, so that means doing, or whether you prefer reflective observation, so watching. And the second dimension is whether you prefer abstract conceptualization, basically thinking, or concrete experience, so feeling the experience for yourself. Now, you will sometimes see the east-west line called the processing continuum, and that refers to how we approach the task. Do we watch it or do we do it? And the north-south axis you'll sometimes see called the perception continuum, and that refers to our emotional response to the task, how we think about the task and how we feel about the task. So let's jump in and take a look at each of the 4 learning styles. So first we have diverging, and people who prefer this learning style can see things from different perspectives. They prefer to watch rather than do, and they prefer to collect information and then use their imagination to solve problems. People with this learning style like working in groups, they take feedback well, and they're interested in different cultures and different people. The next learning style is assimilating, and people who prefer this learning style enjoy ideas and theories, but they're less interested in the people side of things. They're logical problem solvers. They'll be more interested in the logic of a theory than actually its practical application. Now, people with this learning style often work as technical experts, so for example, software engineers and scientists. Now, they prefer to learn by reading, by taking lectures, and by having the time to think things through. The third learning style is converging, and people who prefer this learning style enjoy ideas and theories and enjoy using their knowledge to solve practical problems. That's the difference from the previous learning style. Converging likes to actually solve problems. Now, while they aren't concerned with interpersonal issues, they do enjoy the doing aspect. Now, people who prefer this learning style also often work as technical experts. However, unlike the assimilating style, they like to apply their knowledge in a hands-on way. And the final learning style is accommodating, and people who prefer this style are hands-on, learning through doing and using their intuition to figure things out. They prefer to use their gut instincts rather than performing their own detailed logical analysis. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't use logical information, just that they don't perform the logical analysis themselves, so they prefer to rely on the findings of others. So with that, let's take a look at an example. So imagine you're a team leader and you want each of your team members to be able to coach others effectively. So here is how you might approach each of the 4 stages of the learning cycle. Now, note that you don't have to start at the first stage as it's presented here. You can actually start at any stage you like as long as you follow the sequence. So first we have concrete experience. So you could ask your team to jump in and simply try and coach someone. Next, we have reflective observation. You could ask your team to discuss amongst themselves and share what each has learned through their coaching experience. Next, we have abstract conceptualization. So here, to achieve this, you could provide each team member with a book to read explaining the theory of coaching. And finally, we have abstract experimentation. So to achieve this step, you could hire an expert to coach and to guide each of your team members as they think about planning to coach others. Now, given that you have several people on your team, it's likely they'll have different preferred ways of learning. So here's how you could first approach learning to become a coach depending on your preferred learning style according to Kolb's learning cycle. So if your preferred learning style is diverging, then you could begin by understanding other people's take on how to coach through some kind of group session, maybe a brainstorming session. If you prefer assimilating, then you could begin by reading a book explaining, the theory or the best practice about coaching. If you prefer converging, then again, you can begin by reading the book, but in addition to that, you'd need to put a plan as to how you're going to put the theory into practice. And finally, if your preferred learning style is accommodating, then you would simply begin by jumping in and trying to coach someone learning as you go. So there are some advantages and disadvantages associated with Kolb's learning cycle. So in terms of advantages, then each stage of the model is associated with a different preferred learning style, and that's good because it ensures that all preferred learning styles are covered as you step through the model. Secondly, the model provides a blend of traditional teaching plus hands-on learning. And finally, the model forces the teacher to use more tools than simply broadcasting their knowledge to the students. Now, in terms of disadvantages, then the recognition that learners have different learning styles is useful, but it can be really difficult for a trainer to accommodate a broad range of learning techniques in a group situation. Also, it's not always obvious how to apply the model in the real world. Thirdly, because the teacher is no longer broadcasting their knowledge, they need to know their students already, be familiar with them so that they can tailor their training to them. And finally, the continuous cycle approach to learning isn't really ideal if you need to take an exam at some point in the future because it's an open-ended cycle. So in summary, Kolb's learning cycle consists of 4 stages of action that have to take place for effective learning to have taken place according to the model. So those 4 stages or steps are feeling, observing, thinking, and doing. And finally, the model also describes 4 different learning styles, acknowledging that as unique individuals, we each prefer to learn in different ways. So that's it for today's lesson. Really hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.